Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of season 6 of Bios and Bookmarks, powered by the NGC Bocas Lit Fest. I'm Shivanee Ramlochan, the Bios and Bookmarks project manager, and I'm really excited to be talking today with the Jamaican poet and academic Jason Allen-Paisant. Jason, welcome to Bios and Bookmarks.
Thanks so much, Shivani. I'm excited to be here with you.
Jason's here to talk with us today about his extraordinary, sensitive, deftly wrought debut collection of poems, Thinking with Trees, published by Carcanet Press this year. It is a remarkable collection, but don't take my word for it. None other than Lorna Goodison says. Jason Allen-Paisant deftly inscribes his own signature on worlds inner and outer in these gorgeous poems. The future of Caribbean lyric poetry is in great hands. When we conceptualize a theme for this season, season 6, which is At Home the Green Remains, taken from the title of a John Figueroa poem, I knew instinctively I had to have Jason on the show. Because as you will see, his poems are examining the very animistic roots of what it means to be a Black man, body, intellect, and spirit in nature, and how one carries oneself through a world that is fraught with racial tension and animosity. Let me tell you a little bit more about Jason and his life and writing. He's a lecturer in Caribbean poetry and decolonial thought in the School of English at the University of Leeds, where he's also the director of the Institute for Colonial and Postcolonial Studies. Jason serves on the editorial board of Callaloo, Journal of African Diaspora Arts and Letters. He holds a doctorate in medieval and modern languages from the University of Oxford, and he speaks 7 languages. His debut collection of poems, Thinking with Trees, was published by Carcanet Press in 2021, and his memoir, Primitive Child, on Blackness, Landscape, and Reclaiming Time, is forthcoming. Jason, I think it's a perfect moment to invite you to share your first reading from Thinking with Trees for us.
And thank you so much for that generous, kind introduction, Shivani. Naming. 1. In the wood I hear the beautiful call of a bird I do not know. I wish I knew the names of birds and could identify them by their songs. It would be so much nicer to say I heard the warble of a wood pigeon as the red floor of the woodland stretched before me like an avenue through the high rises of beeches and oaks. As I walk on the path and feel the soft cushion, feel my foot press down into the flesh of the duff. Because a name is reassurance, a comfort in the flesh to hold these songs in the trees so something could be mine. Warble, trill, bell, fluting, something nearly right. 2. The urge I feel is to give things names, but everything is named already. The urge I feel is to connect with this land, these plants, birds, songs, these trees. To name things would be perverse. Perhaps the place within will always escape the name. In the mind, one leaves, leaves, and leaves, but on stone, earth, and grass, one stays forever. I have a few trees on my tongue: oak, maple, birch. I have a few birds on my tongue: seagull, mallard, redbreast. I have a few plants on my tongue: rhododendron, English ivy, iris. I have started to see that nothing is itself, everything turns to something else, like birch bark becoming veste de loup. I prefer the sound of my wife's ancestors, the ashes of their throat, like the rhododendron barks becoming fighting pythons, and me gathering chestnuts for dinner in a stream that dips below ground and re-emerges often. This life I no longer know. 3. When I go walking in Mallam, there's still that part of me that didn't want to come, that doesn't want to be in this land of Carrymore jackets. All I can handle is nature on the fingernails, my grandmother planting Negro yams, shaping the land. All I can handle is the landscape within me, not scenery spread out on a canvas. And from the landscape of Leeds and Yorkshire to the landscape of home, Jamaica. Bear with me. It's going to come. For those who steal away, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, AME, was founded in Philadelphia in 1816. Emmanuel AME Church, Mother Emmanuel, was established when the congregation in Charleston, South Carolina met in secret until the end of the American Civil War. In St. Mary, Jamaica, the ruined building of an AME church can be found at the site of a former sugar plantation in the dense forest near Kwame Falls. As stated on the plaque on its front wall, its leader was one Mrs. F. Aitchison. On the plaque is inscribed the date, 3rd June, 20. The land. We feel blood coming and going, says my guide, in roots that ruins cover. Our blood is felt in the underland of spirits, running through slavery and ports of blood, connecting roots of AME, Philadelphia, Baltimore, New Orleans, Savannah, Charleston, where a white man opens fire on a black congregation, killing 9, running through these St. Mary Hills, and the Ebenezer AME, overgrown with bush, souls inside trees. In iron, lignum vitae, wind and leaves keep memory. The sea is right beside us as well, humming people long dead, and these ruins standing in time suspended. A strong place. Clap of the waves against the cliffs below is the theme of the stone's song outside the curtain of woodland. Here on this rocky hillside where the underworld temple stands, land screams sneakily inside its stones. Women are born from rock, with backs hardly remembered for the men they carried in war and rebellion. What happened here? The moss-blotched guango says nothing about the black understory. Its pioneer, Mrs. F. Aitchison, is covered by ruins, by the lichen mat, by the guango sapling piercing through the belly of the sanctuary. Displace, a song for the AME and Mother Emmanuel. How, Lord, did you teach the soul of the slave to grow into a tree? The murdered body to burst out of the ground like cedar, the Mandinka warrior to rise from the root of lignum vitae. If Charleston souls found new bodies, could they have found them here? Found muscles, breath, hands and arms in these trees? I listen across time, their hallelujahs in the lives of wood. The secret stone does not silence, I listen. Here they have stolen away. A God decided they should stand, that their arms should wave a memorial in the land that unburies the dead. They sing, out of AME and Otahiti grows, a guango rises from the body of praying mothers. Epilogue. Kwame Hills, St. Mary, Jamaica. Sleeping land of spirits. The pathway through the bush rises rigid and sheer. Succulent lianas and cocoa leaves pause as if waiting. The fisherman, my guide, walks behind. We're in a land of uncurated people. Crossing the threshold. I am walking. I am not going. My body moves along the way with patience for the breeze. The morning pallor lies on the green, the ravens stand on the light, and the expanse opens to my feet. High pitch and stitching sound of the jackdaws, a bedding of brown leaves covering the hummus, and in the middle is a stream that can hardly be heard. I come up from the round water with shadows I did not know. I can smell spring rising from the soft hollow. The stream hides things under its mirror, whispers, growths, blood, skin coming to cover the body. It flows more heavily in a black bed, leaves banana ground the crack where home runs, where yam vines settle on a silent river, through a hill of steep bones, singing from all sides, through the woodland. I hear damhead, cow pastures, and tomato beds more loudly over brown leaves, so alive, so alive. The ground is a black dress falling on a bed of pure manure. Green shoots are out. The ivy floor gives off murmured laughs, and a bird shoots through the tangled thoroughfare. What does the stream in Coffee Grove feel as it grows near? Going deeper now into the intimate recesses of the trunk, into the zones hidden from view but working to keep me alive, my eye looking at me from everywhere and making noises, the forest refusing to quiet its walking, eyes of the hillside in black soil, sounds in the redness of barks, the dangling of the branches in the brain of the stream. Faceless tree whose eyes dip into muddy tracks, I have face for you in my blood. I have space for you in my blood. Within you shines a flame, traveling under your dress, the sap flowing in your inner dark are the words I want, the words of a classroom of trees. 3 teenagers are younging their lives on the crest of the hill, highlights of orange spill down on their laughs, the sunset, with a trail of jet smoke over the clearing. A black man comes through a thicket with his baby, gives the head tilt, Yebra. Seeing me, see him. Here in the woods, the darkness encloses just right. I go towards the tangled arch, not far away. My volumes enter a cell. In it, I hear the sound of protoplasm bursting, the green grass coming back at my feet as I walk. But what are these woods anyway? I do not always understand what changes inside my head when the muscle boys with pit bulls and knives appear. If the city is so hostile, then why would we come here where nobody would find us? If we were mauled, if we lay bleeding, a densely covered tree would hide us. In here, history keeps following me around. So to be in these woods is not your idea of being free, but you will keep on seeing me. A sprout of grass in a root's crevice blooms into a pack of dogs. Beware of spring. Believe you are a sprout of grass and love all you see, but come out of the woods before the white boys with pit bulls come. The barks in winter, solid brown, today are tinted green and hyacinth. The light darts with the quickness of the word bird. Do I have time for one more? Or Is that my time?
Ed.
Um, I'll just read a shorter final one, um, if I can find it. And this one is dedicated to my mother, who is listening. I think she said she was gonna tune in. She said she was going to tune in. Bear with me. Bear with me. Yes. Um, yes, I've lost the poem, so I think we might have to keep that for the next one, the next segment. I've lost the
That's
poem,
fine.
Shivani.
It will, it will return.
It's somewhere in the book.
We know that it's in there. Seasonality is a
Yeah,
big part of this entire
yeah.
theme.
I
So
think my mother will like that, so I'll read that in the next segment.
beautiful. And thanks for being with us, Jason's mom, and for everyone who is with us tuning in from all over the world. Thank you for joining us to listen to Jason read these poems and to talk about this exceptional work. Jason, I've known and I have been knowing your poems for a long time. It seems to me more years than I will publicly share. Though I'm certainly not ashamed of them. But
We
I say
should,
that
yeah.
to say that it's been a real education and an illumination to see your poems grow from the first time I encountered them to now. I mean, if when I met you and your work at the Callaloo Writing Workshop in Barbados in 2016, you see, I've now told the world
2015. 2015.
2015. Wow, it's a long time ago. So if I had thought then that you would go on to publish a first book of poems that would essentially be so heavily rooted in eco-poetics, I think I would
Mm,
have been both surprised and not surprised. And certainly now, the project of poetry as eco-poetics seems more alive and more mainstream than it ever has been, which I think
yeah.
is it can only be good. But the first question I want to ask is one of those very base definitions. Did you see this work as an eco poetic work or simply as the work that you needed to do at this point in time? Or did those two states intersect?
I like that question. I'd say that I saw it more as, first of all, I didn't see it as a book. So that's the first thing. Uh, I remember when I wrote the first poem, Where I Was, and it was a kind of burst of a thought in my mind. An intersection of just a time and place coming together is the best way I could describe it. It was the right time and the right place for me to have written the draft of Walking with the Word Tree, which is one of the poems in the book. And that was the first thing that kind of opened it up and set it going. Because there's some things that people need to know about me and this book is that I'd never seen myself in this space before. Um, to be quite frank, nature writing was never was never a thing for me. It was never, um, which is a paradoxical thing to say because I grew up in Coffee Grove, Manchester, Jamaica. If anybody is in the room who is acquainted with that space, very rural, and the, it was with my grandmother who was a farmer, and that was a farming community, and all of these trees that I talk about, the guango, the otahiti, the I don't know if there were any lignum there was any lignum vitae there, but that was the space, very green, very rooted. And yet, I suppose my entire life since that has been about getting away from the woods, getting away from the dirt, from the, I think a lot of people can identify with me when I say that. Um, it's complicated, isn't it? This business of dwelling with the earth and the land and ecology, because on the one side, it's something that a lot of people want to get away from, because you want to get to the city, you want to get to upward mobility, jobs, and at the same time, it remains, I think, at the heart of it, so vital for so many of us. I suppose that's the contradiction, that one of at least one of the contradictions that I'm wading through. But anyway, to kind of come back nearer to your question, it was just this: I'd moved to a part of town that was in a sort of near a woodland. It was very green, and I would get off the bus and I'd have to walk across this field in the dark, and you have all these trees around you and all that. And I just noticed the the air that I was breathing. Something about it made me notice that this was an open expanse. This was a lot of air. I mean, it seems clean, fresh. And in that moment, something happened, and it's as if I was returning to my hillside village. And I was also thinking, why did I never stop to think about trees? Why didn't I never stop to know about trees? Why do I not know the names of plants? Why? This is a series of whys. Um, and because to kind of essence of where I live is just being able to go out into the woodland and hear lots of birds and bird calls and see all of this woodland, and that kind of just concretized the thing for me, so that I was doing just these questionings were taking form, I found, in my body, and I just had to write them out. And within that, there's all these issues about time, taking time, um, leisure, which is obviously connected to time. It's a view of time, space, and
I mean,
time
as
and
you talk
space.
about
Yeah, yeah.
leisure, it makes me think instinctively of how you respond to daffodils
Mm,
and to so for those of you who have not yet spent time with Jason's book, which of course you're going to remedy as soon as the session is done, there's a beautiful and pointed response to Wordsworth's daffodils in as one of the poems, which really challenges the idea that Black people throughout history could have ever had access to a kind of rest or indolence or passive relaxation. In
mm,
fact, the poem really heartbreakingly proves the point that there could have been no such thing as white leisure in its many permutations, indeed in its profitability, without forced black labor. And while the book is intensely personal, as anyone will see in spending time with it, it also makes all these profound gestures to history and to, I mean, to not just history as a monolith, but the
mhm,
undeniable parts of history that cause people the most discomfort. So Jason, what was it like to kind of reconcile or try to
mm.
balance what is deeply personal to you as a father, as a husband, as a man, as an academic, as a being in nature, and all the history that you were also addressing? What was that balance like in the book?
You know, I suppose, in a way, I'd been thinking about all these things all along in different ways. You mentioned that I'm a scholar who looks at the African diaspora and cultural production, and just Black expressive culture, African diaspora expressive culture. Um, and I think a lot about the body and what it is to live in a Black body, and in all sorts of ways. And essentially, I think in walking through this space, and so I pause here to say that this was very much an embodied work for me, because as you see, it comes out of the lived, the walking through the park, the walking through the woods, and all of those frictions and encounters and joys and everything, and just that was a direction, sort of like a way, I thought, in which I could think about those questions. Essentially, it's the idea that through nature writing, or whatever they call it, ecopoetics, ecopoetry, whatever the word you have for it, that space, which is so often not thought of as our, people of color, or, it's sort of framed very much as a white pursuit. But I think the challenge then for me was to say, let's open it up, let's open it out. Um, and what if we addressed what it is for Black bodies and bodies of color to be in green spaces, to go for a walk, to go for leisure, to go sort of thing. All these romantic and romanticized and kind of, leisure is has become such a fascinating thing for me, because I think about who has it. It was just through this book I just realized that growing up, I didn't really know leisure is sort of like the word is all is kind of like the thing itself is something that you step into, and leisure was to me a class, that's sort of an upper class thing, or things that other people had, um, and I guess I'm not trying to say, okay, I'm going to have leisure now too now myself. It wasn't like that, but it was about thinking, what does it mean, and why is it that I never imagined myself taking my time and occupying my space, and so yeah, that's how I found that just the fact of going into these spaces opened up the questions.
And you show almost immediately that while there is a sort of baseline freedom to go into the space, like no one is telling you not to go in per
Hmm.
se, or preventing you entry to the woods, there is a very real and present and insidious threat that you animate really terrifyingly, I have to say, in the best possible way, through dogs, through dogs who are accompanied by, they're usually white owners and taken on walks as well.
Hmm.
But as so many of the poems prove, it's almost as if these dogs have more autonomy than you do,
Hmm.
than that they have a kind of agency in their bodies and a freedom to bound up to you, to place their paws on your body and on the body of the speaker of all the poems. And there's a way in which the poems are connoting this intense helplessness alongside this spiraling rage and frustration.
Mm.
And in previous interviews, you've been asked, are all these dogs real? To which you said yes. And it made me think of nothing so much as Chamoiseau's beautiful and
Oh yes,
harrowing
yes,
historical
yes,
novella, The Slave Old Man, which was recently translated, I believe, in 2018 into the English
yes,
by
yes.
Linda Coverdale. And for those of you who are not familiar with that story, it is essentially what it says on the tin, in that a slave, an old slave, is pursued through a dense and sort of apocryphal wilderness
Hmm, hmm,
by his owner's hound. And I thought Jason is doing something just as dense
hmm.
and intense here. So I want to know what it felt like for you to be writing through all of these beasts progressively, and the conclusions you came to on the page in doing that work.
Yeah. You know, that work on thinking about um, dogs and their owners, and this particular embodiment of the the dog owner, um, I think it's very much connected to all of the stuff you know, we've mentioned previously. So the leisure, uh, it you know, a colleague said to me after reading the book, that white people, and this is a white man saying that he thought that dogs enabled white people to have a strong sense of their embodiment, and like, I guess his that was, you know, he's a dog owner himself. Is a kind of power, you know, feeling powerful. And that it struck me. It was a it was eye opening. Just to, I mean, I kind of thought that myself looking on, but it was kind of a revelation to hear him say that. Um, because what I was grappling with was, um, what is it and what does it mean to have a strong embodiment when, um, human embodiment, when I think he also said, forgive me, just in brackets, I think he also said something about to feel like an animal. Um, it enables the owner to feed, and that's very interesting in and of itself. But then just in this physical landscape where black people have to be, you know, content, black people are so often bumped out of the category of human, right? It's kind of seems is so foreign and so weird and so odd to kind of be thinking about, you know, I'm gonna channel my inner animal. So I think that that itself was, I guess I was looking at that very knotty issue there, about who gets to channel their inner animal or who gets to have this strong embodiment in the space, which you refer to, right? Because I think a lot of it is about strength, in the sense, perhaps not, that's not the best word, but it's the space that you get for yourself. It's about, I think, the kind of the power or something of just being able to be in your space. You know, you have people who, you know, just constantly throwing things, and their dogs are just running all over the place, and they own the space, right? And so I just thought there were some questions that people needed to be asking themselves, um, about that. You know, like, yeah. So
Yeah,
it,
I've seen people sort of ask you,
yeah,
is it that you hate all dogs? And that's
yeah,
never the
yeah,
conclusion I
exactly.
came to at
I
all.
exactly. I think obviously that's not the point, as you realize.
Hmm.
I I even got in. Should I even say this? I got
Yes.
invited on the BBC on a program to talk about dogs. I'm scared of listening back to the program because I think I said a lot of things, and I don't know to what extent that they were edited out. Um, but I don't know. I mean, obviously things have to be edited out, but yeah, I think I'm asking questions about space entitlement, um, that are uncomfortable for a lot of people, which I think it's easy for people to reduce it to say, okay, he doesn't like dogs, he's writing about dogs. No, it's a part of this, the questioning around, you know what, Sean Hewitt wrote a review of the book where he said, one of the lines went something like, where dogs where dogs are welcomed, Yorkshire Park, where dogs are welcomed, black men are suspect. I think it kind of sums it up in a way that,
And the poems
yeah,
are also,
yeah.
you're putting yourself as the experiencer of these really terrifying interludes
Mm.
with wild at the front and center of so many of the poems, but you're also gesturing to things that have happened not just to you but to people who are recognizable in public space. And I think you do that profoundly well in the poem that addresses the Christian Cooper issue, the in which he was accosted by a woman who ironically had the same last name as him in Central Park.
Yes.
This was in May 2020. He was bird watching, but in his black male body, he was instantly accused of being a threat by this woman. And the incident, of course, um, went viral quite
It
quickly.
did.
And the way in which your poem confronts that makes so much room around his personhood, and it's as if the poem is very clearly saying that at all times, if nowhere else, this man's autonomy and body and self will be
Mm.
acknowledged. It must be acknowledged and given an habitation in
Hmm.
the life of the poem.
Yes, yes, yeah. I mean, you articulate it much more eloquently than I would have, but yeah, um, I was drawn to that incident. I mean, when it happened, I was in the process of writing these poems, and so it was like almost impossible for me not to kind of engage with that, because I think it lays out, it demonstrates so much, and then there's the visual dynamic of that. People can see the encounter or the confrontation, however you look at it. Um, it just says a lot, and I needed to weave that one in. It's called on property. So it's going
There's
back to some of the
There's
intersections.
a really interesting linked comment and question from St. Lucian poet John Robert Lee, who's joining us, who says, first, the question is, who controls the space? And then John goes on to say, the dogs represent the menace, the threat, the power impositions that come against Black bodies, which is, of course, exactly what we're speaking to here.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so I initially, I write. I've written essays. I started to write some essays around these. And initially, I was going to take out, which weirdly, there's a cycle in my book, as you know, Shivani, called essays on dog walking. There are four of them, and those have had a strange life from to the point where they get into the book. They weren't originally intended for this.
Mm.
I for a long time, I'd just been kind of sticking with the idea of writing a nature poetry book, which to my mind needed to be, oh, the joys of nature, oh, the beauty of listening to the birds and trees, oh, the wonderful. And that, that kind of vein, I guess, romantic heritage and this kind of thing that you get in a lot of contemporary nature poetry still. And it became very obvious to me after a while. I couldn't abstract the body from this, and that I I was thinking about a nature poetry of stops and starts, of shocks, a nature poetry of joy, but of jolts, because I think that is literally what the experience is. A nature poetry of precarious embodiment, not the nature poetry of the body as a comfortable couch, the body as an unquestioned presence.
Yes, because there's
It's
not
yeah,
there's not that freedom in the
yeah,
speaker to simply write a book and say, I went to the woods because I wish to live intentionally. It's like, well, no, in the black
yeah,
body, there is already a circumscribed, intentional kind of living that has been happening historically. It's only the Thoreaus and Wordsworths and who get to inhabit the page in a certain way. This is why
yeah, yeah.
Thinking with Trees, I think, is a book that everyone of
Hmm.
any color description should take with them on a walk.
Hmm.
Truly, and have other have you in their ear, audiobook style, reading to them, because it's as you say, it's impossible to interface with nature and to be one with trees without that precarity, without the
Yes.
joy and the jolts.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think in a way you've said it's also the challenge. I don't know if I don't think I needed to challenge myself to go, but there's the challenge that says I need to be here. I will be here. That there is that kind of boldness and
Hmm.
feistiness and determination to occupy one space as well, to say that I am not going to stop coming. I am going to be here because this space belongs to me as well. This space belongs to us as well. So yeah.
I
Um
think I think that
yeah.
is, if you have found, if the poem to be read for your mother has appeared, now
Yes.
I think is a good time to invite you to do your second reading.
Okay. Okay. I don't know. It's called All of a Sudden. I don't know. I didn't think that this could happen to me. But I forget the title. I forgot the title of the poem, but it's called All of a Sudden. All of a sudden, it may be easier to define walking based on what it is not. Seeing your body through the eyes of another, standing outside yourself, watching self. I was going somewhere. I was on my way. I never allowed my body to occupy space the way these people do. Walking did not exist. Perhaps it didn't need to. Perhaps walking is pressing one's weight onto things. Perhaps to not walk is to make things breathe in the depth of their silence. But perhaps walking is breathing different, with power and blossoms and breeze. I went somewhere to collect the breadfruit, buy big gill of oil, 3 pounds of flour. I carried the partner money, but Tikia, Tikia you, Tikia you go a river. Mind you drown, you want me murder you? Chicken Mary Hawk the near. It may be easier to define walking based on what it is not, always going, always hurrying, always time short, always chicken merry. We don't have time to waste, hark the near. Now I am walking, I am not going. I'm going to read a couple of more short ones. Um, right now, I'm standing. No, I think I'll leave right now. I'm standing for the very last. Because the poem about Kwame Falls, for those who steal away, somebody pointed out to me recently, I found this uncanny, that the plaque bore the date 3rd of June 1920. Was it something like that? And that this poem starts with um, on the 3rd of June. It's called an evening walk when spring is already old. So they were wondering if there was a deeper meaning behind that, and no, there wasn't. It just happened to be literally the 3rd of June when I went out. An evening walk when spring is already old. On the 3rd of June, I re-enter the woods. The trees' souls have bloomed into canopies. There is volume, not just skeletons. Breeze passes into the placenta of this womb. There is hiding place in the trees, and the birds sing differently. The leaves have become a sea in my body. Right now, I'm standing beneath what used to be, I imagine, an impressive tree. Split down its bole, it has sprouted green leaves that will be rustling way into September. At its base, lying athwart the clearing, is the severed part. The color of brown has weathered to near gray, and the footfall of walkers has covered the wood with a layer of dust, and yet the part that has fallen among the spikenard and hungry shrubs surges out of death. The raspberries feed on its breath, and beetles thrive in the slurry middle where the bole rots. Listen, there is nothing as exhilarating as the feeling of life coming into you. Though people look suspiciously, stand and listen. Do not go anywhere. We have been the workers, just the workers. In the Congo, one man had a land almost 80 times the size of Belgium as his estate. We have been property. When I talk about reclaiming time, I'm just thinking about my body standing in the middle of this woodland and doing nothing. Nothing. The final one I'll read is it's a short poem called Daffodils, Speculation on Future Blackness. It's time to write about daffodils again, to hear a different sound from the word daffodil. Imagine daffodils in the corner of a sound system in Clapham. Can't you? Well, you must try to imagine daffodils in the hands of a black family on a black walk in spring.
Thank you for that, Jason. I I truly hope that people joining us will take a walk and a think with these poems, whether or not they are often immersed in nature, whether they are in verdant Jamaica or in very industrialized Leeds, or, the intersections of those places that are neither one thing or another. I think the poems are showing us so powerfully that no one place is a monolith. You're getting some fan mail in the comments here. Miriam Morgan says, I'm listening and
That's
enjoying the reading and conversation.
that's my mother.
Congratulations, mother of Jason, for being incredible. And we have a lovely comment here from Kiki Imani who says, wow, that last poem, which I agree with. There is a way in which these poems, as you can tell, if you're listening, work on you both suddenly and all at once. They seem deceptively pastoral, but don't be deceived. That is the last thing they are. You can tell that Jason has a powerfully attentive air, and let's be honest, the kind of unflinching bravery it takes to take a certain kind of whiteness to task and to make it ask questions about itself. It truly does make this book, as Lorna and Kai have said in their blurbs for it, something phenomenal, something very far out of the everyday. We're going to play a game with Jason, but before we
Yeah.
do that, there is one question that has been lingering that I really want to ask you, and it is about the fact that you speak 7 languages,
All right.
which is a remarkable accomplishment for any person. But it made me think about polyvocality and
Mhm.
how you bring that experience to nature. Did you find that as you were taking these walks, one language or another was asserting itself to you predominantly? In your head, like in the conversations you would have with yourself, that then became poems, they all become a certain kind of English? And I think the answer to that must be no, because there are insertions of French in here, at
Mhm.
least that people can read, but of the other languages, or does a different kind of language that is, buttressed by nature kind of
Mm.
emerge in response to what you were experiencing?
I love that question, Shivani. In a sense, it opens up something for me. I'd say a few things. One is that I'm still learning to give myself the right to use my languages, uh, and to give way to an aesthetic that would really show the multilingualism, whatever it's called. That said, as you've said, there are some spatterings of different, like, spatterings of French. There's also spatterings of the Jamaican, as in the poem that I read. Um, what I found myself doing sometimes is your question was about, does one language become predominant as I walk through? I find that things shift depending on
Hmm.
where I am and what I'm reading at a given time. And I remember moments when things come in other languages, like there's German. So like German is my most recent language, and I throughout the pandemic I got immersed in it, and I would get something in German, but I would flip it and render it in English. So sort
Hmm.
of that would um, allow me, sort of give me a different lens on the language. So that would come out in the poem. So for instance, there's one particular poem that I'm thinking about where um, it's sort of semantically or syntactically isn't English, but it's German, so I leave it there. Yeah, that's
That's incredible to know. I feel
yeah.
like just thinking about all of the you selves who are in the book is
Mhm.
extraordinary. I think this is a singular kind of collection,
Mm,
Jason, and I feel very lucky to be in this world, pandemic and all, that has given rise to
yeah,
it. There's a
and
lovely
I
comment from Khadija Ibrahim just to share, who says, "Thanks for sharing these beautiful and meaningful poems."
thank you, Khadija, who's one of my rocks here in Leeds. I want to say this as well, Shivani. I think I need to say this is, you're somebody who's always supported my work from the first. And I really, really, really appreciate that. And um, it means a lot, as in coming a first book, you kind of look back at the journey. And I remember that workshop, the sort of workshop that we attended in Barbados, and the exchange and the encouragement. So yeah, I guess all the more happy to be here chatting with you, knowing how much you believed in the work from those early days. Yeah.
Thank you, Jason. I will tell you that it's not hard to do when the work is work like yours. And I mean that completely. And now, before I burst into tears of emotion, let's play this game so we can laugh a little bit.
Yeah,
As
yeah,
you
yeah,
all
yeah,
know,
yeah.
as you all know, the name of the game is promptly written, and in it, we put writers in a dream scenario. The scenario is this: the writer, in this case, Jason, gets onto an elevator. On that elevator, he finds two people already in conversation, and they happen to be the publisher and the editor of his dreams. They're already
Wow.
talking about a topic, and it is this topic that Jason has to pitch them his dream, big passion project on. It doesn't have to be a book, it can be any creative thing: a film, a play, a, a CD, a sculpture, anything of the sort. The sky is the limit. Well, the elevator is a limit in this case. And as you know, we tailor the prompts to our specific writers. The prompt we've come up with for Jason is actually an English proverb. It says, "Put not thy hand between the bark and the tree." Put not thy hand between the bark and the tree, which is the English proverbial way for saying, do not interfere in other people's business. Jason, let's have your pitch.
Don't fasten up in a people business. Mm. And so it's timed. It's like literally, it's 1 minute. Is
No,
it 1 minute?
no.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Um, ooh, I just love this. Put not thy hand between the bark and the tree. It's the most fascinating, mysterious saying ever. Well, I think I'd want to do an exhibition. I don't know where this is going. I really don't know where this is going. Um, s- with sculptures, I just feel something smooth. Probably it's the
Mm-hmm.
sculpture that I feel. But I want an exhibition in a room with sculptures, with work sculptures that people can walk among,
Mm-hmm.
and somehow there has to be um, plants and
Mm-hmm.
wildlife and trees involved as
This
well.
sounds kind of like your book is coming to life.
It's kind of like a miniature version of a Yorkshire sculpture park.
I love
Um,
that. I
and
mean,
instead of "don't touch the objects," it was somewhere be written somewhere, "touch the objects."
like put thy hand.
Put thy hand upon the objects.
I love that. I mean, we chose this proverb for Jason because it was really fascinating seeing that seems to have nothing to do with trees or nature, but on the other hand, it's really talking about what happens when you get under the skin of intimate relationships, and in this case, we've heard that there's so much of that going on in this book, the relationships between trees and people, between dogs and people, between different kinds of people and each other. I mean, Jason's book is giving us this great permission to put your hand on the skin of things, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you feel wildly out of your element, and to take that permission to be in this space. Again, Jason, I can't thank you enough for this session. It's been a complete joy and delight, and I encourage everyone to read and live closely with this book.
Thank you, Shivani.
This has
Thanks,
been
everyone.
Bios and Bookmarks, powered by the NGC Bocas Lit Fest. Of course, if you've been a fan of the festival for a long time and you know our work and love what we do, now is a great time to become a friend of Bocas Lit Fest. All the more so because there is a 15% discount on all our membership tiers. You'll see some information about that in the end credits. We'll be back next week. Until then, stay safe and read Caribbean books, starting with Jason's. Goodbye, everyone.